What is something that feels unfair in your life right now? Now, that's a pretty easy question to answer, isn't it? I mean, nobody has a hard time coming up with what's unfair about life. Maybe you're thinking about sports and how the refs always seem like they're working for the other team. Maybe it's school and how teachers sometimes legitimately have favorites and they treat them that way. Maybe it's your parents and how it feels like they have higher expectations for you than any of your friends' parents. Maybe it's your siblings and how their life is easier than yours in like a million different ways. Or maybe it's simply anybody you describe with anyone who's smarter, richer, prettier, stronger, and how unfair it is that they're naturally something-er than you are. And when something is unfair, we basically hate it, right? I mean, nobody's like, oh, I'm so glad my sister gets away with all the things I'm grounded for. Or, man, what a blessing that I'm literally less smart, funny, and good-looking than that guy. Good stuff. In reality, nobody likes unfairness. And perhaps the thing that feels most unfair in life is the idea of forgiveness. You know, forgiving people when they're sorry and when they're not sorry. A lot of times, forgiveness feels unfair. It feels like they're getting away with something. It feels like they took something from us and we aren't getting it back anytime soon. Somebody talks bad about you. A friend doesn't invite you to a party. A friend starts dating the guy or the girl you already had a thing with. A family member says something hurtful. A parent takes off and abandons you. A teacher makes you feel dumb. A coach overlooks you every single time. And after getting hurt like that, you're just supposed to let it go? Nothing happens to them, no paybacks, no consequences, maybe not even the apology they owe you? Just forgiveness? How's that okay? Jesus offers us his thoughts on the question of forgiveness in a story he told Peter, one of his disciples. And this story is recorded in a historical document written by a guy named Matthew, who knew Jesus personally. And that document was included in the New Testament portion of the Bible. Jesus' story speaks directly to the questions we all ask when it comes to people in our lives who are sorry and not sorry. Jesus tells the story about a servant who borrows a lot of gold from his master. It would be like saying he borrowed $1 billion and can't pay it back. Well, when the master realizes the servant has no way to pay him back, let's just say the master was really upset. But instead of saying, sorry, you're just gonna have to work the rest of your life to pay me back, or I'm gonna hurt you like you hurt me, instead the boss cancels the debt, free and clear. Poof, it's all gone. And the servant probably felt pretty good about it. And I would too, because here's what I know about me that's probably true for you. I'm okay with how unfair forgiveness is when I'm the one being forgiven. The reality is, we do not have a problem with experiencing forgiveness when we're the wrongdoers. But extending forgiveness when we've been wronged seems to be a bit more complicated. So Jesus continued the story by saying that the same servant who had just been forgiven of like $1 billion, he has someone who owes him money now. But it's not a lot, just a few coins. Way less than what he owed the master, and yet he refuses to give the guy a break. So when the master gets word, you can bet he's ticked. The master had been unfairly good to his servant, and how did the servant repay him? By being incredibly harsh to someone else. So Jesus ended the story by saying this: in his anger, the master handed him over to the jailer to be tortured until he could pay back all that he owed. This is how your heavenly Father will treat you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. So in the very end of the story, Jesus connects the dots for us. This isn't a story about a guy and his servant and some bags of gold. It's a story about us. It's a story about humans, especially those who follow Jesus and have been treated unfairly in the best possible way by being forgiven for everything we've done and ever would do. I think Jesus was saying to his followers, what are you doing? Yes, forgiving your friend for the one thing he did feels unfair, but I forgive you for all the things you've ever done and would ever do. I didn't make you pay that debt back, and you couldn't have anyways. Instead, I forgave you times 1 billion. So when you refuse to forgive someone else, that's a problem. Now, I don't think Jesus told this story to be like, see how bad you are? You're all a bunch of jerks. I think he wanted us to see the situation clearly because he knew it would change how we respond. He knew when we see forgiveness the way he sees it, when we see the amount that we've been forgiven, it'll be easier for us to forgive what we're owed. In other words, forgiven people forgive. I love this story because the truth is, you and I couldn't pay back the debt we owed God. Our sin was too great in number and too graphic to name. But despite all of that, Jesus took all of our sin, each and every one of them, with him to the cross and paid for it with his death. We couldn't pay God back for the sins we committed. The cost was too great. But God made the payment himself through his son, Jesus. He did it for you. In the same way, the people who hurt you owe you more than they're able to pay you back. They can apologize, but they can't give you back the time that you lost by thinking about what they did, or the confidence you lost when they hurt you, the reputation you lost when they lied about you, the energy you lost trying to get past it, the peace you lost when they did what they did to you. Saying sorry is nice, but it isn't going to pay you back what they owe you. Not by a long shot. But when we choose not to forgive, the people we're hurting is ourselves. Remember the last line of Jesus' story? Jesus said the master handed that servant over to be tortured, and then gives us this warning. Just like the servant, when we refuse to forgive, we get tortured. We get imprisoned. Not physically, but we still suffer. It's almost like we get stuck. We keep thinking about it, reliving it, and having imaginary fights in our minds. Whatever the it is, if we refuse to forgive it, it keeps hurting us. It keeps torturing us. Holding on to that hurt will squash our spirit, crush our countenance, and exhaust our emotions. Here's a newsflash. The person who hurt you isn't carrying the debt they owe you. You are. They're not thinking about it as much as you are. They're not reliving it as much as you are. They're not hurting over it like you are. So I think Jesus is saying this. Not only is forgiveness the right thing to do, it's the right thing for you. So here's the bottom line. When forgiven people forgive, it sets both people free. It lets both people move on with their lives. Is it unfair? Sure. But in light of what we've been forgiven, not really. And in light of what it gives us in return, it's totally worth it.